All right, welcome to the PHLY Sixers show from the wonderful Reading Terminal Market.
Who's this guy talking to open the show? Where's Devon?
I am here with Kyle. Devon has the day off. Good for him. He deserves it. He only got 3 months off to start the company, but he is doing well. This show is presented by Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary, just like the food here at Reading Terminal Market, which I'm sure Kyle and I will be diving into here
I
shortly.
already dove into a little bit of it before the show, and then I got pulled away from it to talk to Anthony and VG for a little bit. But this is one of I said it last year when we were here, it's one of my favorite places in Philadelphia, just full stop, not even favorite places to eat. Love it here. Happy to be here. Happy to be here with you, buddy.
Yeah, it really is. If this was a regular thing, I would not complain at all because there's a lot of food here, and I'm sure we could find a way to keep ourselves occupied. All right, so we have the Sixers obviously got not the start to the season anybody wanted, so we're going to do a show today of basically our wish list, our holiday shopping wish list, because they have struggled in pretty much every aspect, in pretty much every regard. There's probably a lot that we could go through, whether that is health, whether that is, what they should do at the deadline. I don't even know. We'll get into that. Whether that is quite simply just putting that round basketball through that round hoop a little more consistently. There is a lot that has gone up wrong so far. Kyle, where would you like to start here with this one?
I think we have to start with the obvious one, right? And I think it'll dovetail with some positive news that we got yesterday in terms of the big guy. But number one, numero uno, top of the list, has got to be healthy Joel Embiid, right? Yeah. If you could sit here today on December 20th, or you find this wrapped under your Christmas tree on Christmas morning, and someone were to tell you, I can guarantee you right now that Joel Embiid's going to be healthy the rest of the year, I think that would be the most transformative thing that could happen for this team, because it means he can get a run of play in, and I know that's something that you want to get to at some point. You want to see a long stretch of this team healthy and on the floor together, but he's also, as we've found out, their start to the season, he's still by far their best player, even in a compromised state, and he has the biggest impact on this team, even in a compromised form, even when he's battling the knee issues, the pain, the swelling, all that. So if you could sit here and tell me, maybe not that he's going to be like Superman Joel Embiid, but he's going to be relatively healthy Joel Embiid, I think that would be at the top of absolutely everybody's list, at least for the people who are not thrown in the season and trying to tank.
It really is look, they're 8-16. I think they're only like a game out of the 10th spot right now, which is crazy. But they're 8-16, and yet despite that, and despite the uncertainty with Paul George, and obviously he looks better now having come back the second time, but you never really know. Despite Tyrese Maxey having a pretty much season-long shooting slump, although it's been a little better here over the last couple of games. Despite Jared McCain going down for what could be the rest of the season, we'll find out. He could come back sooner than expected, but what could be for the rest of the season with that torn meniscus. Despite all of that, you could talk me into some pretty irrational optimism. If you told me, if we could wind back the clock to 12 months ago when Joel Embiid was dominating the league and didn't have this latest injury. Yeah. And if you would come back, and even if he wasn't able to get to 70 points against the Spurs, Joel Embiid, even if he was coming back at maybe like 90% of his MVP level, you could talk me into some pretty irrational confidence if you just told me that guy was going to be in 80% of the games. Everything that we are going to talk about probably from here on out, everything that we've talked about up to this point in the season is very much colored by the fact that there's so much uncertainty, and for a lot of people, and deservedly so much pessimism over whether or not he can stay healthy. So absolutely, if you're wishing for something, it would be hard not to start off with the big man's health.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good segue to, we did get a bit of positive news yesterday, right? Where at practice, first we got an update, weirdly enough, from Andre Drummond, of all people, who spoke to reporters and basically let slip that Joel was ahead of schedule, but you didn't hear that from me, sort of deal. And Nick Nurse had already said prior to that Joel had participated in practice the 2 days that they got this week to get on the floor together. And so those were good things, right? Because we had no idea once they made that announcement on, what was that, Monday? I guess they said he had the sinus fracture and he'd be out for a week. We had no idea if that meant he had to just be like out of sight, out of mind for that week, or he was going to get some individualized work in. I was assuming no contact and very minimal cardio and things as he's waiting for this to heal. But they officially upgraded him yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, to questionable for tonight's game against Charlotte. And so I think that says a couple things. One, thankfully, as Nurse had said earlier in the week, the injury was not as serious as previous injuries, and that's a good thing on its own. But also, two, and this is a really important thing to say because there's been a lot of, a lot of debate and consternation over Joel appearing in games. He wants to be out there as much as possible, and he understands the urgency of this moment, right? And so we don't have to relitigate the whole everything I've done for Philadelphia, like that whole thing that people are mad about. But I think the underlying point that he was trying to make there is still the same, right? That he is a prideful, competitive guy who will put himself out there the second that he's able and allowed to by the medical people. And it seems like that could be tonight against Charlotte. That would be, frankly, it's not a boost I think they need to win this game. I think you probably need it more against Cleveland. But if you want to say they need to bank the closer to guaranteed one right now, that I can understand.
Yeah, it probably is. I think on a normal year, you would say, all right, sit this one out, see if Maxey and Paul George can carry you over Charlotte, bring out all of the big guns for the tougher team, try to get both wins. At this point, you're 8-16.
Yeah.
You are, there is a pretty easy pathway to at least getting back into the play-in, if not the playoffs proper. Bank the win. Don't count bank the win. I think that's probably the right way to go about it. But yeah, it is. And look, the face, once you found out it was a sinus fracture and it wasn't like orbital bone or anything like that, the face was, to me, it's still not going to be the biggest concern. Him coming back early is great, especially because they told you he'd be reevaluated in a week. Reevaluate doesn't even always mean he will be playing a week. It just means they will literally reevaluate it and see where he is standing. For him to be coming back in a couple of days is good. You do need to bank every win, and Embiid being on the floor will help with that. You need to form some chemistry and be able to evaluate your big pieces, which is something I'm sure we'll get to soon. But we are still that doesn't, when we started off the show saying that, the thing we're wishing for is Embiid's health, that I don't think is going to alleviate too many people's concerns because the knee is so much more the primary concerning point. But still, it's a great development for sure.
Do you think they could get away with wrapping his body in bubble wrap, literally, and throwing him out there? Or
give him a hockey helmet?
Or what's the material? Is it carbon fiber that they make the masks out of? Do you think you could make a full carbon fiber suit?
Look, I'm willing to try it, man. I mean, with the way some baseball players get now with putting padding on your elbows for getting hit with pitches, I push the limit and see when the NBA gets mad at you. I'm fine with that.
The baseball post-at-bat process is always so funny for Bryce Harper will have the full arm. And I'm not, this is no knock against him. It's just a very funny thing to watch. Guy walks and then it's here, let me take off the wrist guard, the elbow pad, this wrist. It's just so many different parts that go into it. And then you have the batting gloves versus maybe a sliding glove. It's just, baseball's funny to me in that way.
It is. And I remember Chase Utley used to get a lot of grief for that because he would just stand there and he wouldn't even try to get out of the way of a pitch. He's like, give me the free base, fine.
Oh,
People would get mad because he had so much
Craig
padding
Biggio
on.
was the master of that back in the day.
But nowadays, compared to what players wear now, that's not even a lot of padding. Anyway, we are not here to talk about the Phillies. We have a team in disarray to get to.
Yeah, so what's on your wish list, Derek?
I just want minutes with the big three together. And that certainly dovetails into Embiid being healthy, obviously. But I need to evaluate. I need to evaluate how they look. I need to evaluate whether or not they should be buyers at the deadline. I need to evaluate, if they are buyers, what kind of skill sets they need. I need minutes to do all of that. And it's not just about winning games. Obviously, though, having your big three there will help you win games. I need time to evaluate. I can't be sitting here and going well, these net ratings on 45 minutes. No, that doesn't mean anything. So I really need, like I said, whether or not they should be buyers, and I'm sure that's something we will get into later on in this show. Whether they should be buyers is such a huge, huge decision. And maybe there are young players who satisfy both a win now and also a building block for the future. Maybe there are players who, if you spend a draft pick or two now, will retain that value if things go sideways. But that is a little bit of a, you are trying to thread the needle there. And if anything goes wrong, you could end up spending resources, very limited resources, on a lost season. So I need time. I need time with those three on the floor.
Yeah, and I think that's a universal sentiment in that organization right now too, right? We hear it from Nick Nurse. It's really hard to figure out what lineups work, what combinations work, what are your pet plays, go on down the line, without having the actual team that you thought you were going to be coaching available and on the floor, right? To only have these few game samples of PG, Maxey, and Joel together. And then there's lots of downstream stuff too, right? Like Caleb being banged up, and he's a guy that he will not play tonight. It remains on the shelf, and honestly probably for the best, right? Because we've seen how he shot this year. But Caleb was I would say a pretty key offseason signing, and you haven't gotten, I don't know, like any of the guy that I think you were expecting, because he's had to play in a compromised fashion as a result of all the other injuries. And so you can't, it's like we pencil Caleb in for whatever role, whatever minutes going into the season. You can't even depend on that, let alone the health of Joel, let alone the health of Paul. And so you can't really figure out, like, all right, who are the expendable guys if you want to make a trade? Who are the guys that truly fit around Joel and Paul and Tyrese? Because it's with all of them, right? It's not just in these. What Caleb looks like, for example, in a Maxey-only game means very little for any kind of playoff or championship aspirations. And I know saying championship aspirations is and sounds ridiculous right now when you consider where they're at. But that is the vision line that they're looking at, right? That's when we came into the year and we're telling you, hey, Joel Embiid, the whole plan is they're going to try to keep him, not on ice, but at least safe and responsible for a lot of this season. That meant that you're only focused on a championship. You're only focused on a deep playoff run. And so we just know so little about what this team looks like. I mean, this is a more positive example, but Gershon Yabusele has been a pleasant surprise for most of this year, right? Most of his minutes were coming in a position that he's probably not going to play at all in a competitive playoff environment, right? And that's just, there's so many guys that are getting moved around and stretched out and overextended, where if that bill of health comes, then the most important part comes. I asked Nick Nurse about this the one day, Derek. I think it was either pregame or at a practice. Like, what is the first step now that you have guys healthy? And it's like, well, it's just looking at them, right? You can't necessarily drill and practice things when we haven't been able to run the base stuff and just get a baseline of evaluation from that. It's such a crazy thing to say. We're almost at Christmas. That's over a quarter of the season. It's a long time, and there's just no baseline to go off of.
Yeah, and it really does, like I said, it impacts everything they're looking to do. And I agree with you. Like, people can scoff at the contenders thing, but as long as Joel Embiid still has years left of, I'm not even calling it his prime because he hasn't shown he can stay on the floor, but as long as he is under contract and part of the team, they're going to try to compete for a title. And that you have to do that responsibly. Part of that responsibility is, only using assets and resources if you have a legitimate chance. And the way Daryl would define a legitimate chance, the percentage that Daryl would give to have to justify that is probably lower than a lot of fans. But as long as that is not zero, they are going to try to compete. So how high that is above zero, whether or not you should give up resources for more pieces is huge. And it is not just winning games, it is evaluation. And like I said, it's not just, like you said, it's not just the big three. It's the surrounding pieces. We've just seen very little of it.
Yeah, well, probably a good time to take a quick break. And I see a comment that will be a perfect segue after we thank a few of our friends here. We'll come back, talk about some more items on our Sixers Christmas wish list. And obviously, if you guys have some things that you want aside from health and stability, which I imagine you do, feel free to let us know in the chat. We'll be back in a second.
All right, first up, we want to tell you about Game Time. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. When you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it also makes the perfect gift. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Here are some of the features that make Game Time so easy to use, and Kyle and I got to witness this firsthand as it made what is almost an impossible task or seemingly impossible task going to the Sphere out in Vegas. It made that possible. We spent hours on this app trying to get the best, so we know what it brings. Again, here are some of the features. Priority Game Time Picks. It is curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, and theater. There's all-in pricing, so when you toggle this feature, it shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. They give you panoramic seats views from your seat in the app before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect. There is the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Then there's also Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off.
And everybody, I'm a little bit jealous that our earlier colleagues were able to have some beer on the show. And I'm here to tell you about some Coors Light, baby. As we always say around here, we are here to choose chill. When you walk out of a Sixers game and yet another freak injury has happened, I know. It's full panic time, full anger mode. It stinks, right? But you can always take a step back and choose chill with an ice-cold Coors Light, and you know that it's going to be ice-cold because the mountains turn blue on the bottles and cans right as they hit that perfect temperature. Listen, when I found out Devon wasn't going to be here today, I'm not going to lie to you. I had to choose chill a little bit. I had to think, man, how am I going to get through an hour with just Derek? It's been a while. We're out of practice. We're without our guy who pulls it all together. But then I was like, we'll be at Reading Terminal Market. We're going to be in a good mood. I'm going to be well fed. I moved on. And now, after the show, I can enjoy a cold layered, cold filtered, cold packaged Coors Light with a smooth finish and get that mountain cold refreshment right here in Philadelphia. So when you choose to rise above it all, choose chill, choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show presented by Bet365. It really is an adjustment having to do this without Devon because usually, he starts off with the intro, he throws it to you. I don't even have to pay attention for like the first 5 or 6 minutes. It's fantastic. All of a sudden, Bree gives us the sign, and I have to talk right off the bat. It's very different. It's
amazing. I mean, next time I'll do it. How about that?
I'm fine with it. I just got to remember, Devon's not sitting next to me. I can't zone out right now. Yes, it's very different.
So there was a comment that I wanted to get to that was a subject that we brought up. Sean Ford said, on my 76ers wish list is Santi Aldama, and that's it. So
if only there was some news that made this especially topical.
Well, I have some great news for you, Derek. Santi Aldama is in the news. So, friend of the show, Jake Fisher, who...
And by the way, people say that. No, Jake is legitimately a friend of the show. We were colleagues like a decade ago.
Which is funny because I feel like Jake and I at one point were not on the best of terms.
Well, here's a good thing. You can get under a lot of people's skin, so you have some experience making amends.
That's true. So Jake and I are very tight now. A lot of respect for his work. So he was speaking over at Bleacher Report, but is also a part of the Steinline Substack now. Mm-hmm. They combined their insider traits, insider skills, contacts to put that together over at Substack. But on a Bleacher Report live stream, Jake was talking through a bunch of trade rumors. Obviously, we're past the December 15th date, which normally is overhyped, but we actually did get an immediate Dennis Schroeder trade to the Warriors, so I guess I can't say it's overhyped this year.
I still think it's probably a little overhyped, but there's a little contradictory information.
So Jake brought up the idea of Santi Aldama being traded to Philadelphia and framed it as, correct me if I'm wrong here, Derek, as a guy who they couldn't come to an agreement on an extension in Memphis, so obviously it's someone that they're willing to trade for the right price, and as someone that he believes the Sixers would be interested in if they're going to be buyers, but also is that sort of player, maybe a different caliber player, but similar player that we talked about in the offseason, Derek, about it's a younger player, a guy who has room to grow, a guy who you get on the expiring as a restricted free agent, who then you have the ability to pay basically whatever because you have his bird rights and you have him here. Also has a skill set that would be really valuable for this team, which is the important thing. So for those of you who haven't seen Santi Aldama, I'd say he's mostly a power forward, stretch four type. But I think he's been able to play some smaller center. And I think if you have him out there with some bigger guys, with some wing athletes, and you can play some true 5-out basketball, a player like that could really unlock some things for this team.
Yeah, it really can. And somebody who can play that 4, but also then slide over and be that stretch 5. And he's having the best shooting season of his career. You know, we have talked a lot. If you're listening to the show, you'll know how much we focused on young players on rookie deals who teams don't want to extend. It's a way for the Sixers to acquire them cheaply in terms of outgoing salary, of matching salary, but then be able to give them a significant raise and a way to basically add salary to the team and work around the limitations of the apron and second apron, which they will have to do now that they've given Paul George and Tyrese Maxey all of that money. So it's someone that I think we've been targeting. It's also interesting because the way that the middle class of the NBA has been squeezed here in the apron and second apron years creates, normally you give out the players coming off a rookie scale, you give almost by default a second contract. So they're restricted free agents. They tend to come in cheaper because of that. You don't have to, those middle contracts weren't as damaging in previous iterations of the collective bargaining agreement. But now teams, I think, are really questioning these contracts that in the past used to be foregone conclusions. So if you have someone like the Sixers who already know that they're going to be operating pretty much, it would be tough for them to even stay under the second apron next year. They know they're going to be in that range. They could almost look at that as an opportunity rather than a deterrence. And he does fit both, he can, I think, contribute now. He's got the positional need. He's got the skill sets need. I think he's really grown as a shooter over the years. He's shooting like 36% from 3 over his last 3 years, with this one being the best season of his career. Almost half of his field goal attempts are on 3, so he's comfortable taking a decent volume. I think he's grown as a connected passer. I think he's just a really sound decision maker, and he has the size to play power forward and in a pinch play a stretch 5. That is a piece that you look at and you say that could be valuable not just this year, but long term. And like we were talking about in one of the previous segments, what you do at the deadline has to be, it has to be targeted. It has to be somebody who either that you're competing now and Joel's going to be healthy enough, so you're going to push chips in, or it has to be somebody who can be with you long term and at the very least, retain value and possibly even grow in value if they grow their game. Or they have to be a long-term fixture going forward. I think he has the skill sets to play alongside Maxey and McCain and Paul George and hopefully Joel Embiid over the next couple of years. So he is somebody who is not just about, all right, let's acquire this guy for the stretch run and then go from there. I think he's somebody you would actually pencil in as I don't want to say a building block, but certainly as part of your franchise for a couple of years. Yeah,
so I think he falls in a different way, but falls in that the Herb Jones bucket of you're acquiring him hoping he can help this year, right? And hoping that acquiring him is relevant to your playoff chances, your title chances, whatever. But the value of the trade is not solely on what do we get from you from January, February, or whatever until the end of the year. It's what value can you provide from whenever he would be acquired until the next contract is over. Although Herb, it would be his current contract. But same thing. Over the next few years, what is the value you can provide? And I think if you look at how the lineups with Yabusele at the 5 have worked and how much easier offense has been for someone like Maxey, the whole team, but certainly for Maxey, when he can play with a guy who drags a defender out rather than a more rim-bound center in Andre Drummond.
And even just someone who makes quick decisions in the dribble handoff game on the perimeter. Yeah.
I think the ability to run constant pick and pop, and look, if teams want to leave Santi Aldama wide open for a pick and pop jumper, he has shown that he can punish you for that. And if they don't, then you put Tyrese in a foot speed battle with whoever the defender is on that given possession, and you're going to take Tyrese on those over and over and over again. It makes it a lot harder to do what defenses have been doing to Maxey most of this year, which is either showing too high and forcing the ball out of his hands, or you're loading up at the rim and you're saying, Andre Drummond can't hurt us, right? Like if he does something great, but we're expecting Tyrese to drive into 2 and 3 defenders at the rim. That strategy, while maybe it doesn't get eliminated, you damage the effect that it has on Maxey and on the team by putting a real pick and pop stretch big into the rotation. And frankly, like if you're just looking at it from a playoff perspective, the short-term perspective, it's just another option, right? Like it's just another guy who has that positional versatility, who, similar to Yabu, is a quicker decision maker and will move the ball and facilitate good offense without being, a high-level passer. As Derek always says and said just now, you can never have too many good decision makers on the floor and on the team. So I would be a big proponent of this. I guess the big question with Santi would be, what's the cost going to be? Because he's, as you pointed out, this is his best shooting season ever. He's going to be a restricted free agent. He's only, I believe, he's 23 and he'll be 24 in January. So that's a guy, if you want to get him and you want to take him off a Memphis team that's playing him 26, 27 minutes a game, that's going to cost at least one real asset, if not two.
Yeah, and at the very least, I'll throw it over or change a little bit. Would you prioritize, let's assume that the costs were equal, and I don't think they would be. Let's assume the costs were equal. Would you prefer Herb Jones or Santi?
If the costs are equal, it's Herb.
Okay.
But I think his cost, because of the points you made previously about being one of the archetypes that people just really covet in today's league, I think Santi will come at a cheaper price. And so I think that's what would make me probably lean toward him as a deadline guy.
Yeah, I agree with, just a pure player, I would probably prefer Herb. I think that defense is just so special, especially fitting around the stars the Sixers have. Santi might be a little more gettable, in part because there is that concern about that next contract and what he might be able to command. Whereas with Herb, he has a contract, 2 years and maybe $26, $27 million left, maybe a little more than that. But there's a couple more years left. There's that price certainty, which I think drives up the price a little bit. Even if, like I said, this market for players of this archetype, I think, has been punishing. Now, one of the things I'm really interested in, did the league just sort of overcorrect? Did they overreact to the new collective bargaining agreement?
Yeah.
Or are players' salary is going to creep up for this middle class? Or is this a new reality? That I'm not 100% sure of. But I think because Jones is under contract for 2 more years, and just because I think that archetype of a real impact defender on the wings and having that kind of defensive versatility is so sought after, I do agree he would probably cost more, and that might make Santi a more appealing target.
Yeah, and by the way, while we're on the subject of Herb, because I had people on Twitter, Blue Sky, in the chat as well, say that he's on the wish list. Jake Fisher also reported this week, and this might have been Mark Stein. The sharing the Substack thing is going to trip me up a little bit. One of them reported that Herb is just off the table.
We now need Jake at one point to say, one of those PHLY guys, I don't know, you shouldn't have 2 people on a show. One of them, though, reported.
Listen, I read all their work, so I know it was from one of them, and it's on their shared enterprise, so we'll just give credit to both of them. I believe the framing was the only untouchables are Herb, Trey Murphy, and maybe Messi, but I don't know that he's. I feel like young big you could probably move, but
untouchables always get thrown out way too much.
Yeah,
there's 5 of them in the league, and none of the guys that we're talking about quite meet that qualification. But if they're being thrown out there, they're basically signaling hey, it's going to take a Godfather offer.
Yeah, and I think the broader point is probably more along the lines of they're open for business on the vets, between Zion and Ingram and McCollum, and I guess they wouldn't trade DeJounte after trading for him in the offseason and not really seeing a whole lot of them yet. But I think those are the guys that will get more active discussion between the Pelicans and other teams rather than Herb. So I think that's probably a pipe dream, whereas Aldama seems like a more likely, because look, the Grizzlies, the way they operate their team, while they wouldn't want to part with him, he's a guy who can help you in the playoffs this year on a team that, frankly, is really, really good. As we saw last night, they beat the crap out of the Warriors last night. I still think at the end of the day, they're cognizant of we're a smaller market team that doesn't operate like way over the cap or anything like that. So if we can get something for this guy now before we just lose him, then we'll do it.
Yeah. No, if you, and obviously they know more about his desires, his financial desires than anybody else. If you came to the conclusion that you weren't able to come to an extension agreement, you don't think you're going to be able to bridge that gap before free agency, you do still have restricted rights. So there's always a, hey, go test the market, see if there actually are greener pastures, especially because of everything we talked about with the new collective bargaining agreement, and because he's restricted. It might be viable just to have him test that and come back. But if you're pretty convinced that he doesn't want to be there, getting resources for him is absolutely the right path. All right, I have one that was brought up to me on Twitter from Jackie about their wish list. Never hearing the phrase lateral meniscus ever again in her life. I could not agree more.
I wish I didn't know as much about the knee.
Yes.
Considering, and like, is there a piece of wood? Yeah. Knock on this wood behind me. I have not personally ever suffered a knee injury. I dealt with tendonitis at a time or two, but I wish, given that I have not suffered injuries myself, that I did not know so much about the knee and the various parts inside it as I did from simply covering a basketball team.
It is wild how many mornings I have spent with research papers. It's absolutely stupid. So Jackie, I 100% agree. I don't think that's realistic with how everything's going, but I feel your pain.
I mean, listen, we also think about being a kid and you just think of you broke your arm. Oh, you broke your foot. You broke your leg. Now it's like, I know the difference between the navicular bone and a Jones fracture. Yes. It's just like all the stupid things that you have to acquire along the way on this job. Stupid things, but they're useful things, right? It's so when we hear, oh, such and such fracture or such and such tear, there's at least some background that we have. It's not good background, but it's background all the same.
It's definitely useful for our job, yes. Sadly. All right, so outside of that, obviously we talked about health quite a bit. We talked about trade targets now with Santi. Anything else that's really on your mind here? Well,
I'll tie the Santi thing into one of my other things. They got to make threes, man. And that would be – so if the theoretical world where Herb Jones and Aldama are the same price, you could make the argument based on how horribly they've shot the ball this year that they really need to pursue shooting above all else. Now, that's a strategy that's gotten them in trouble in the past, right? Yes. Where last year, Buddy Hield comes here, and Buddy had the normal 2-3 weeks of greatness that he normally brings when he goes to a new team. And then he starts to fade, and then you look at it, and it's like, well, what else does this guy do, right? And another side of it would be Seth Curry was really, really good for this team, right? Really good. Great partner to Joel Embiid, really helpful offensive player. And even as he was one of the guys that shows up in Game 7 against Atlanta those few years ago now, he's also the guy getting dog-walked on the other end by Kevin Huerter. And so prioritizing shooting is a thing they need to do. And some of that's going to have to come from the internal stuff. Paul George has really been trending upward there. That's a big deal. Joel Embiid's going to have to help them in the shooting department. Certainly he can't be worse than Andre Drummond shooting threes, which has happened a distressing amount this year. But their open three shooting percentage remains one of the most mystifying things I've ever seen, right? It's one thing to say, hey, they haven't been a great shooting team because you're employing Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, and a bunch of other questionable guys beyond the stars. It's another for open threes, which make up a huge chunk of your offense, being hit at like a 26-27% rate. That's borderline impossible at the NBA level. These guys are, even bad shooters are better than that, right? Modern NBA shooters are better than that. It is wild that they can't make shots to the degree that they've struggled this year.
13.8 three-point attempts where they have 4 to 6 feet of space between them and the closest defender, they are shooting 26.9%. If you were curious, yes, that is by far, by a couple percentage points, the worst in the league.
Who's second? Or who's second worst?
Sacramento Kings, and then the Toronto Raptors.
And
both at like 28, basically right around 30% or 29%.
That makes a bit of sense to me in that DeRozan's a big piece in Sacramento, and they've had some shooting struggles for other guys, and the Raptors just stink. So it's like, that's your company right now. It's not good company to keep, I would tell you that.
No, it is not, especially because so much of that, and look, there are a lot of things I'm worried about with this team. I do think Tyrese Maxey and Paul George are going to make shots. You've already mentioned Paul George looks like he's starting to work his way out of it. Tyrese Maxey has had 2 or 3 pretty good games from the perimeter. But it's so easy to overreact to everything else going out on the court when that round ball isn't going through that round basket. Like, it is just so much easier to look at what's going on and be like, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and this isn't perfect, and the ball movement this, and the scheme's that. When those perimeter shots go in, it opens up everything on the floor. It opens up a lot of scheme options for Nick Nurse. It just makes you feel better about what they are doing. And I certainly don't think that Nick Nurse has been perfect, but it is hard to scheme around the fact that your 3, because Joel Embiid shooting like 16% from 3. Your 3 best players can't make an open 3. There's only so much you can realistically fix that with, especially in today's NBA, and there's been a lot of discussion about that here over the last week. There's only so much you can do to work around that.
100%. So see if we have any other items after a quick break to thank some of our friends, and we will be right back to talk about some of your items on your Sixers Christmas wish list. But first, got to tell you about our good friends at Bet365. And you guys know, whatever the moment at Bet365, it is never ordinary. Bet365 has 90 million users worldwide and 780,000 events that they live stream each year. Their early payout offers across the NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB are great. So here, I'll tell you about a basketball early payout offer. With the Bet365 early payout, you're a winner if your team goes up by 20 points. And in today's NBA, with all the threes, a lot of teams go up 20. You win that bet, and then you don't have to suffer when they blow that lead in the second half when Boston or Chicago or the Sixers or whoever else messes it up. That's an instant payout on straight bets and parlay selections marked as winners. Download the app and use code PHLY365 when you sign up. Get a 100% parlay boost. Double your winnings on parlays with Bet365's 100% parlay boost. And guys, download the app, use code PHLY365 when you sign up to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Whatever the moment, never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Hopefully you don't need to call that, Derek. Keep those bets in Benton Bodner over there. Keep those bets in order, my friend.
I haven't had a wrong bet all year.
Oh,
unlike our co-host. All right, we also want to make sure we tell you about Golden Nugget Jewelers. While the Sixers are hunting down a ring, yes, you heard that right. While the 8-16 Sixers are hunting down a ring, if you have that same level of irrational confidence, you can too at Golden Nugget Jewelers. I'm kidding. Hopefully, if you're buying a ring, you are very confident in the person you're buying it for. I'm making a joke on the Sixers' expense. Golden Nugget Jewelers is located at Chestnut and 8th in downtown Philly and is a family-owned and operated business since 1987. If you're getting engaged, Golden Nugget Jewelers has a wide assortment of rings and wedding bands to fit anyone's style. On top of that, you receive a final cleaning and written appraisal with every engagement ring purchase. But Golden Nugget is not just wedding jewelry. You can find watches, diamond necklaces, diamond bracelets, earrings, and more. You deserve an expert and the best price. Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. Head on over to goldennuggetjewelers.com to learn more.
By the way, we really flubbed it. We should have switched those ads because Martian pointed out in the chat, said Kyle's got that Trinidad James. Not gold all on my watch, gold all on my chain, Martian. So yes, you are correct. I probably should have done the Golden Nugget Jewelers.
Or at least I wouldn't be hiding behind my... Anyway.
The computer screens are really messing with the drip here today. And Winona reached out to me after we were talking about grills on the show yesterday, right? Because I did the and Winona reached out to me in a DM and was like, I'm doing some scouting, and it was a picture of a grill shop. And Winona, I'm sure you're in here and listening, or maybe you're listening and watching later. I do not believe I could pull off a grill, nor do I think I would try. But if you see one that you think fits the aesthetic here, so to speak, I will keep an open mind. I would say that.
All right. So in terms of going back to what we are hopeful for, I know a lot of people are for the tank. I know. And look, if I didn't know the percentages, you could talk me into draft talk. I've said it time and time again, as long as Paul George and Tyrese Maxey are playing basketball, I think the floor for that team is barely missing the play-in. Like, that's the absolute floor. So you're talking like a 15 to 20% chance of even keeping the pick. I'm not going to push for that as long as those two are healthy. I desperately just want quality, meaningful basketball. I want the season to matter. I want to be able to get excited. I want to be able to get my heart broken. I want to be able to get frustrated. I can't do any of that if I'm checked out on the season. My wish during this holiday season, I want meaningful basketball in February, March, and April.
I hear you, buddy. And I think that dovetails with a thing that I am hoping for. And the Christmas season, some people think of it as, I have my wish list of what I want. Sometimes you have to think of it as, what does it mean for other people? And so the point about meaningful basketball, meaningful games, I want Tyrese Maxey to start having a better time on the floor, because I think if you look at his demeanor, and I'm not saying that he needed to be goofy, smiley kid Tyrese Maxey his whole career, but I do think you've seen a noticeable shift in his demeanor this year that is in part a reflection of the situation, right? He's frustrated, and I don't blame him for being frustrated. He pushed back his security, his extension by a year to help facilitate the roster changes, to help facilitate the Paul George signing, to help facilitate a lot of things. And he, in his head, I'm sure, all these things happen, and he's looking forward to, I'm running it back with Joel Embiid, who's a great partner for me. I'm now getting Paul George in here. I'm getting these role players like Caleb Martin and Drummond and all these guys to come in. And for many reasons, those have not worked out to as well as he would have hoped, or as the organization would have hoped. And look, on this show, it hasn't been unfair criticism, but we've had to criticize him quite a bit because he's been one of the main faces of the struggle so far. And I've said it many times. This is not about rooting for the team or having pom-poms as a reporter. It's looking at Tyrese as a person, knowing the work that he puts in, knowing how much he cares, and watching him go through this on these nights where he's angry, he's frustrated, he's upset, and that being more of a day-to-day thing rather than just like a momentary thing. I don't want that for him. I want to see the Tyrese Maxey that goes out there and plays with real joy and watch that spread throughout the team, because I think that's something that helps lift everybody up, not just his game.
I'm glad you pivoted there and went to other people, because I am coming at it from a purely selfish standpoint. I have to watch this team every day. I have to talk about them 5 days a week. I want good basketball. The start of the season drove me mad.
Man, our Eagles guys are stars over here. They got cheesesteaks brought over for them. Meanwhile, we're just sitting here by our lonesome. Very sad.
On my wish list is the Knicks, so if you're in the area,
there was a the Knicks here when I was on with Anthony. You just needed to be here a little bit sooner, I guess.
I'm also picky. I probably would have walked over there by myself anyway. But yes, my wish list is to do more shows here so we can eat the wonderful food.
Hey, listen. And so connected to the Maxey thing, not really connected, but we're obviously he's one of the guys who has helped Tyrese feel a bit better. We're going to wish for speedy and safe recovery for Jared McCain. That's certainly high atop the list at this point.
Yep.
Now, that's not to say, and we've already said this point on the show and elsewhere, no rushing back for Jared, right? If it takes 6 months, if it takes 8 months, however much time it takes between now and the next time he plays to get to 100%, that is what matters, right? But if he could get back sooner,
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
No, I am grateful for the fact that he was able to get the repair. We have brought this up time and time again. The difference between a repair and getting some taken out, removal is significant. It's significant.
I was going to say, did you forget the word for sniffing?
I forget all of the words, all right? It is a constant struggle to be able to talk
well,
on
good thing
live
you don't
TV.
have to talk for a living.
Look, I'm just here doing my best, all right?
I know. That's all we're ever doing.
No, but we've talked a lot about the difference between a repair and a partial removal. That is something we have had extensive experience with, obviously, with Joel Embiid, who now has had 3 of those surgeries. But the fact that he was able to get that repair is something to be grateful for. It is something obviously going to cause him to miss significantly more time. We're talking about the difference between like 4 to 8 weeks as a timeline, between like 4 and 6 months as a timeline. It is significant. It has a chance, and obviously everyone heals differently, so you never really know, but it has a chance to put his season in jeopardy. I'm grateful that that was an option. As we've mentioned before, and again, that is not always a choice you have to make. A lot of times it depends on where the location of the injury and the blood flow and all that stuff. Go to allphly.com, look for Kyle's article
blood
from
flow.
last.
Too bad it's not a Blue Chew day.
Oh boy, you had to go there. You had never mind. We already had you have something grateful for there, but I agree with Kyle. It would be great. I hope he has absolutely 0 complications, and if that means that his timeline is moved up because there are no complications, great. If that means that his timeline is the same, that's still fine. He is so young, has so much of his career ahead of him, and obviously, like a meniscus is different for a 6'2" guard than it is a 7-footer, but you just want to make sure his career gets off on the right foot. For him to have had a Rookie of the Year caliber season, especially when you look at it through the prism of the rookie class he is in, to have had that taken away and had to go under the knife so early, it is a Sixers tradition unlike any other for the Sixers rookie curse, but it seems like because of the repair, hopefully that is a good place he will be in, and I hope that continues to be the case.
All right, do you want to do some complaining now?
I can't wait. Been waiting all show for this.
Yeah, so this has been I would honestly say this NBA season has been defined by complaining. Do you think that's at least in the public sphere, do you think that's unfair?
Are we talking about league-wide or the Sixers?
League-wide.
Yeah, probably.
I think the dominant story or discussion, and this is a real indictment on the league that this is the case, has been about ratings and fan interest and what are the problems with the league. That all kind of came to a head yesterday when LeBron got asked about All-Star and the changes to fix it that they made. And I can't repeat the exact words he said on our show here, but basically said, we got a lot of other problems, brother. One of them being that we're taking too many threes and blah, blah, blah. So this discussion about NBA ratings and the level of interest in the league, and I guess I'm not asking you to give like the pro NBA case. I want to know if there are issues with the league that you think are fixable, but that are important to address. What do you think is at the top of that list right now? Like, what would change for the people who come in our chat or who we talk to or we see here at Reading Terminal or other places who are like, I'm losing interest not in the Sixers, but in the league in general? What do you think are the most actionable things that can be changed, even if they're unrealistic? Because I know there's one that we probably both agree on that's also not going to happen.
Right. So, obviously the big discussion going on now is the volume of three-point shooting. And I'm not going to come at this from how big of a concern is that for most people. I'll only talk about it from my own level. I don't mind three-point shooting for the most part. If you look at pretty much every shot distribution, and Hedva brought this up in our Discord the other day. You should go into Discord. There's a lot of good NBA discussion going on in there. But most of the time, it's not like there's more jumpers being taken today. It's just those 17-footers have been pushed back to 24 feet and beyond the three-point line. Shots at the rim, short jumpers are pretty much static, which you would sort of expect because when you have to guard people at the 24 feet, you open up driving lanes. That's been a lot of the argument.
Julia's face in the back because there's Christmas music playing that I'm hearing. I don't know where it's coming from.
But I realize that's not an aesthetic everybody likes, so I'll acknowledge that. And also because, you might be taking the same number of jumpers because so many more of them are worth 3 points now rather than 2 points. They have a larger impact on the game than they did 20 years ago when we were talking about mid-ranges. I do think part of it, in terms of aesthetics, what is going on here? There would have been something that you would have complained about in every era, whether it was the iso ball of the mid-2000s or the post-ups or how much fouling they let get away in the 80s. It's just we have the people who are aggrieved or are annoyed have much more avenues to express that. So I think that's part of it too. Where I would start, and I've actually talked to Vince quite a bit about this, the fouls have to. To me, if you want to clean up the game, forget the 3-point shot. I think you can let
bring
that
back
live.
hand checking, baby.
Well, just the number, honestly, and look, we're a Sixers podcast. We like Joel Embiid. As long as it is in the rules that his foul baiting can get him to the free throw line, he should play within those rules. The foul baiting does drive me nuts. I think if you're talking about watchability, and again, I absolutely hate giving Vince credit, but he was talking about this the other day. Watching the best athletes in the world walk to the free throw line and take a shot where it can't be contested while they're sitting there standing and not moving, it's just not what the NBA should be about.
You want ethical hoops, is what you're saying.
Look, and again, I don't begrudge Harden or Trae Young or Joel Embiid or Luka or anyone, SGA, who's elite at grifting. Play within the rules. You should be. Your goal as a player is to try to win. Your goal as a league is to build an environment that is fun to watch. That's where I would start.
There are a lot of officiating problems.
Yes.
So, like, my guy Tony Brother, so I always bring up not officiating a game the same within a quarter, let alone over, in the macro is a big problem. So I would say this, and I think this is I brought this up on Anthony's show earlier, but this to me is the fundamental problem facing the NBA. They're never going to reduce the schedule, or at least they're very unlikely to reduce the schedule.
Yeah. Fewer games would be my number one solution. Absolutely.
It would be the number one solution for several different reasons. One, I think the pervasive, only the playoffs matter, only championships matter mentality, which is in all sports, right? But it's most pervasive in basketball, where the whole GOAT debate and all that is centered around, well, Jordan did this, and then Kobe did this, and LeBron did that. And it's like, if you don't do that, then why should we care about you? Why should you be in like the inner circle, whatever? And it has made people care less about the regular season in general, but that has also coincided with the push to load manage guys, right? Where they're playing less in the regular season. The NBA introduces something like the NBA Cup, and I'm not saying that you need to, from day one, everyone should just be like, woo, like cheering for it and thinking it's equal to an NBA title. But for the Bucks to win the title, the NBA Cup, and you have the picture from the locker room of the untouched beer and champagne. It's like, if the players can't feign, even like pretend that this is a meaningful accomplishment, that these games and this tournament mean something, why would you expect fans to care about this? And then over top of all of this is a problem that I think this is an issue for hockey. I think it's less an issue for baseball, but it's still an issue because it runs unopposed and it's a summer sport where you can just go to the ballpark and not care. But people in the last 4 to 5 years have realigned, recentered, however you want to put it, their entertainment watching, right? When COVID hit and everyone's locked inside, people figured out, wow, all the world's entertainment is basically available on my computer or my TV or my PlayStation, whatever. And you're not competing anymore with just like cable, right? You're competing with Netflix. You're competing with whatever just came out on PlayStation and Xbox. You're competing with so many different things that basketball is an inventory sport. Football is an event sport, where it's once a week. You have a bye built into the season. All those games matter. The competition level is ultra high every game. Now, there's still issues with football. I actually think football is less watchable now than it used to be as well. That's a separate conversation. But when people view your product as expendable, as like, this is just something that like, yeah, I like it, but I don't love it enough to like, I have to watch this game. That's a bad place to be. So the only way that I can see reasonably to cut into that is you have to make the games matter more. Yep. And the way to do that is to cut down the schedule and have less of these back-to-backs. And so I said to Anthony, one of the best regular seasons and full stop seasons we've had in recent memory was the lockout year in, 11-12, where basically the season started at Christmas and it's a dead sprint from Christmas to the end. the average game was so much better because those games were more meaningful for all the jockeying for position and all of that. Now think of what that could be if you even spread it out a little bit more and you're only playing once or twice a week. Then that becomes appointment television, and then those games actually mean something. I don't think the NBA will change it. The owners and the players are never going to take the cut in revenue share necessary to make that happen. But that would be the number one thing that if I could wake up tomorrow, snap my fingers, and make that change, that's what I would do.
No, and you're absolutely right on the last point. I don't think anybody has the appetite for that kind of risk. I would love to see what, some kind of a deep dive study on what like a 70 game or a 65 game, how that would actually impact revenue.
Yeah.
Whether or not, look, you're never going to make an appointment viewing like the NFL, but could you, create a sense of urgency of appointment viewing by cutting games? Or probably more specifically, can you just increase the consistency of the product by having them play fewer games? Because you're getting your stars on the floor more, because you're able to, put them out there responsibly for more games and not have it be a guesswork of whether tonight's going to be a load management night. Can you make the regular season matter more? Like you said, I don't know if that means changes with the playoff structure. Certainly, I think there was an argument that the play-in would help the regular season because tanking teams wouldn't take as much. But if you have so much, flexibility and wiggle room of actually making the playoffs, all of a sudden each game isn't as big of a deal. Maybe that means allowing the top seed or the top 4 seeds to pick their opponent, giving extra incentive for them to be playing hard every night down the stretch. There's all kinds of things that could happen, but I certainly think fewer games is the answer to fixing the product on the court. The problem is both sides tend to like the pretty much 40-year straight run-up of basketball-related income and don't want to change anything that's going to fundamentally put that at risk.
Yeah, so listen, that would be at the top of basically everybody's list. It really is simple, right? Fans want to feel like they're getting value for the time, the money, the effort that they're putting in to following a team and following the league. And I love basketball, right? I'm going to continue to cover basketball as the league evolves and becomes whatever it's going to be, whether they change the 3-point stuff, whether they don't, whether they change the schedule, whether they don't. But I think basketball right now is at some of the same risks that I think baseball ignored for a little while, where they said, well, this is how we do things, and we're not changing. People like us for what we are. And that's true for a decent segment of the population. There's still going to be a lot of interest in the game. But I worry that if you just keep tabling this and tabling this and tabling this, that it becomes an even worse problem. And it becomes a game that, is just not what people want it to be. And end of the day, it's an entertainment product. You want the people to be invested as they can be. And so when I'm the czar of basketball, everything will be better.
Yeah. And, you brought up real quick here before we get out, you brought up that, there are more ways for people to consume content, more types of content competing for your interest. But I also feel like we are just busier as people than we were 20, 30 years ago. So there's a higher barrier to entry to get someone to sit down and be like, I'm going to commit 2.5 to 3 hours of my night to this product. That product has to be consistent. Otherwise, because I feel like we're in a weird spot where I think there are more people interested in and following the NBA than there ever have been, but ratings go down. I think a big part of it is like, all right, look, I'm not going to commit to watching this game, but I'll go find a highlights package tomorrow morning to get me up to speed. Yep. Or maybe I'll listen to the PHLY Sixers guys talk about a game that I didn't myself watch. I feel like there's more of that going on than there ever has been. So it is like you need some, and by the way, we appreciate you watching this stream, even if you didn't watch the game. Watch the post-game show with Devon tonight, obviously.
And pregame.
Yep. But I feel like the consistency and predictability of the product would go a long way.
I think it's about our time. We got the sign from Bree. I don't know if we have time for roll call today, do we? Can we do roll? Okay, we'll do a roll call before we get out of here.
Look, whoever's coming up next, they are not more important than roll call.
Obviously, thank you, everybody, tuning in. As always, as Derek said, Devon will be back tonight hosting pregame and postgame. I believe Roy is with him tonight, I want to say. So stay tuned for those guys. I am off tonight. Derek will be hitting you from the arena with whatever relevant information news comes out. We're all hoping that Joel plays tonight and hopefully gives us an entertaining product. But thank you to all our people, Sean Ford, Martian Lynch, Hedfa, Darkness, I can't do the Rick James. I can't do it. I can't do the Charlie Murphy episode Darkness today. I'm sorry. Val hanging out with us. We got my girl Winona hanging out.
Winona?
Eugene Ross, Ron, Hedfa. What up? Who said that I can be the czar of basketball when she's Empress of Earth? I will take that deal. William, is that Bucher or Butcher? I'm going to say Bucher. There's no T. Randy Rubart, Freddie Powell, Kyle Wright, Jeannie hanging out with us. Who else we got in here? We had a lot of people in here today. Who was our...
Martian does not agree with your decision not to do Darkness, by the way.
Listen, I would sound like a complete wacko in here. Thank you to super producer Bree, as always. And yes, Winona, please, let's work on the grill. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can get notifications each and every time we go live. We didn't bring our bell, so you can't hear the bell. You can hear many things behind us. If you happen to be in Reading Terminal Market, we'll still be hanging out here for a little bit. And if you hit the thumbs up button, that's a thank you to super producer Bree and a thank you to the algorithm who will boost our show and make everybody happy. Goodbye, everyone. Merry Christmas. We'll be back later this afternoon. Goodbye.
We all silly like the mayor.